Curiosity arrived before fear, settling in Eliza May Harper's chest like a held breath as she stood at the edge of Coldwater Ridge, watching the town wake without her. She was 23, though hardship had already pressed fine lines near her eyes, and this morning she felt older still, as if the frost on the boardwalk had crept into her bones. The bell above Wilkes' General Store rang once in the wind, a sound that carried gossip as easily as prayer, and Eliza knew that by nightfall her name would be shaped into something sharp. She had come here with one purpose, and curiosity, treacherous and quiet, wondered what it would cost beyond what she had already decided to give. Her family's cabin lay 3 miles back, crouched low against the hills like an animal too tired to stand. Inside it, her younger brother Jonah slept in shallow breaths, fever-dimmed and thin as a reed. Their parents were buried on the southern slope, marked only by stones Eliza had hauled herself, and the land they'd left behind no longer yielded enough to keep hunger away. Eliza had tried everything a decent girl was allowed to try. She'd washed clothes until her hands cracked, taken in mending, swallowed her pride before the sheriff, and listened to the town women sigh with practiced sympathy that never turned into help. Each refusal had pressed her further inward, teaching her how invisible desperation could be. By the time she learned the name Caleb Boone, it came wrapped in warning. Folks said he lived high in the mountains, that he trapped, traded, and somehow always had money without ever seeming to need the town. They said he was 33, broad as a barn door, with a beard that hid his mouth and eyes that never softened. Some claimed he was cruel. Others said he was simply alone, which in Coldwater Ridge amounted to the same thing. Eliza listened to every rumor as if it were a thread, pulling them together until they formed a rope she could climb. If a man like that wanted anything from her, she could give it, and in return Jonah might live. The decision did not come with drama. It came quietly, like dusk. Eliza packed a single satchel, folded Jonah's blanket twice, and kissed his temple with a promise she did not know how to keep yet. When she walked back into town, boots scraping frost, she felt the weight of eyes before she saw faces. Martha Wilkes paused mid-shelf, lips pursed, already tasting the story she would tell. Sheriff Amos Reed leaned in his doorway, hat tipped back, gaze lingering too long. Eliza did not look away. She had learned that shame only grew when fed. Caleb Boone stood near the hitching post, as if the town itself had pushed him to the margins. He was taller than she expected, shoulders worn smooth by years of labor, his coat patched but clean. When he turned, curiosity flickered in his eyes too, not hungry, not cruel, simply alert. Eliza spoke before courage could flee. Her voice shook only once as she told him what she needed and what she was prepared to offer in return. She did not dress it as romance or desperation. She laid it out like a bargain struck with bare hands. Caleb listened without interruption. The wind tugged at his beard, and for a long moment the only sound was the creak of leather and the distant bell. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, careful, as if each word cost him something. He asked about Jonah. He asked how much time she thought the boy had. He did not ask what men always asked first. That omission startled her more than any insult might have. He said he would help, but not like this town helped. There would be rules, he told her, and choice. She would have a roof, safety, and food. Nothing would be taken that she did not give. Eliza felt heat rise to her face, a mix of relief and humiliation she could not separate. She nodded, because nodding was easier than trusting her voice. Caleb shrugged out of his coat and placed it around her shoulders, the wool heavy and warm. It was the first kindness she had not had to beg for in months, and it unsettled her more deeply than cruelty would have. From the corner of her eye she saw Martha Wilkes lean closer to the window, saw Sheriff Reed's mouth curl in something like satisfaction. The town had already decided who she was. They left before sunset. Eliza did not look back as Coldwater Ridge shrank into a scatter of lights and whispers. The road climbed, the air thinning, and with each step her fear loosened its grip, replaced by a quieter uncertainty. She did not know what waited in the mountains, or who she would have to become to survive there. But as the last sound of town life faded, curiosity returned, gentler now, asking not what she would lose, but what she might finally be allowed to keep. The mountains rose ahead, dark and patient, holding secrets she had not yet earned, and Eliza walked on, spine straightening, breath steadying, knowing that whatever followed would change her forever, whether through pain, mercy, or a strength she had never been permitted to name. Morning came softly in the mountains, as if the world itself was careful not to frighten Eliza awake. She rose from the narrow bed, listened to wind moving through pine branches, and waited for the fear that had followed her all her life to return. It did not. Caleb was already outside, splitting wood with steady, measured swings, his presence felt before it was seen. Nothing about him demanded, and that quiet absence of pressure began to teach her how to breathe again. Safety was revealed slowly, not promised, but lived through ordinary acts of care and consistency each day. Days passed without demands, and Eliza learned the rhythm of the cabin and the man who owned it. Caleb spoke little, yet he noticed everything, from her uneven steps to the way she flinched at raised voices, even when they were only the echoes of memory. He left space between them, as if respect were a language spoken through distance, and she found herself growing steadier inside that room. At night she slept deeply, surprised by dreams that held no panic, only open fields and unlocked doors waiting for her to step through without fear or permission asked from anyone. Work gave her strength before confidence ever arrived. Caleb taught her to set traps, to read weather in clouds, and to trust her hands to finish what they began. He never stood over her, never laughed when she failed, and those small mercies rewrote something old inside her chest. She started to meet his eyes, to speak without apology, and to understand that the bargain she had made was changing shape. It was no longer about survival alone, but about who she was becoming when no one watched, judged, or took notes for future gossip meant to shrink her again. The town returned to her life one afternoon, uninvited and loud, when Caleb took her down the mountain for supplies. Coldwater Ridge had not forgotten her, and its faces tightened with recognition, judgment moving faster than truth. Martha Wilkes watched from her doorway, Sheriff Reed's smile cut sharp, and Eliza felt old shame reach for her like a hand she once knew well. This time, it did not take hold. Caleb stood beside her, silent and solid, making no defense and no excuses, and in that steadiness she recognized her own worth reflected back without condition, purchase, or ownership claimed. Later, when the wagon rolled homeward, Eliza understood that something had ended. The town's power over her had thinned, and the mountain air felt cleaner for it. That night, she spoke the truth she had been holding, telling Caleb she could leave if he wished, now that she was stronger. He looked at her for a long moment, then said she stayed because she chose to, not because she owed him. The words settled between them like peace, and for the first time, Eliza felt entirely seen, not as a bargain, but as a woman standing on her own ground. Seasons turned, marking time in snowmelt, wildflowers, and wood smoke, and their connection deepened without announcement. Caleb laughed more, a quiet sound meant only for the two of them, and Eliza found joy in small things she had once believed were not meant for her. They shared work, silence, and evenings by the fire, where touch came gently and never took more than it gave. Love arrived like morning, unannounced but certain, and with it came the knowledge that she was safe without being small. The life she had once sold herself to save had returned to her, reshaped by choice. When news came that Jonah had recovered, strong enough to laugh again, Eliza wept without fear of being weak. Caleb held her, not as a rescuer, but as an equal, and the past lost its final claim on her heart. They did not speak of endings, because their days were already full. Together they built a life rooted in respect, where no one was owned, and nothing had to be earned through pain. Eliza stood on the mountain one evening, hand in Caleb's, knowing she had not been saved, but had saved herself, with kindness meeting her halfway at home. The mountains remained, witnesses to a love built without spectacle, yet stronger than any promise the town had ever offered. Eliza carried herself with ease now, her voice clear, her choices her own. Caleb watched her with quiet pride, a man changed by learning that gentleness could be shared. They had both come from isolation, and together they had found belonging without chains. The past no longer defined them, and the future felt wide enough to hold joy, sorrow, and all ordinary days between, each one honored by choice, patience, and shared silence under open sky and enduring light. Together. This story rests here, not because nothing more happened, but because happiness finally found room to stay. If you listen closely, you might hear it in the quiet, the sound of two lives walking forward without fear. Eliza and Caleb did not win their ending. They chose it, day after day, through kindness and restraint. May it remind you that love does not need to be loud to be true, and that sometimes the bravest act is choosing a life where you are never asked to disappear to be loved, only to arrive as yourself and remain whole. Enough.